This is part of the Urban Design UDC Talks once again, and this is a lecture series where we host monthly talks that are of interest to the city. But this year we partnered up with the Dix Park planning team in the City of Raleigh Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department to bring together talks and topics that are important to the city as a whole, but also to the planning and development of Dix Park, which is really an exciting project happening right now, which I'm sure most of you know about. So I'm going to introduce Kate, who is the planner managing the Dix Park planning team, and she will introduce Mickey.
So again, my name is Kate Pierce. I'm with the City of Raleigh, and I manage the Dix Park project. So I have the great fortune of having gotten to know Mickey over the past year or so. Officially, he has a really amazing resume. He was the Deputy Director of the National Park Service, the manager of the Race and Social Justice Initiative for the City of Seattle, also managed outreach and engagement for the City of Seattle. You can look up his CV, but he is an impressive individual on paper, but more importantly, he is a new grandfather, which is very exciting. So, and I hope you walk away from this talk today feeling inspired, feeling challenged. You are going to hear we always joke that Mickey drops a lot of thought bombs on us, and we always walk away with things to think about, things to follow up on. He is an inspiration. We are so lucky to have him in our local community. With that, I know no one wants to really hear me talk, so I'll bring up Mickey, but we're so glad that you're here. Thank you.
Well, this is really impressive that you took your lunch hour to be here. I'm a little intimidated, as a matter of fact, but I guess I've been in Raleigh for 4 years. I give you sort of a sense of my career. This starts my 50th year in public service. So I started my public service career in 1967 on the playgrounds of East Los Angeles. A lot of my work has been parks and recreation work. I've worked for California State Parks. I've worked for Seattle Parks, Washington State Parks, the National Park Service, and now here. I also taught for 20 years and served in 3 positions that I can only call ill-defined jobs. But it's those jobs that sort of have prepared me to be here. My career has been like this thing called slime mold theory. And a slime mold is an organism that exists in the forest as independent organisms, and they operate independently, and all of a sudden, for some reason, they decide to come together, right, and form something. Well, that's how my career has been. I've done a lot of disparate things, and I'm wondering when I'm doing these things, what the hell is this about? Why am I doing this? And then all of a sudden, at this point in my life, all of those things that I've done have kind of come together. So I also want to say I have a BA from Cal State Sacramento and a master's degree from the University of Oregon, both in public parks and recreation. So a couple defining moments of my life that sort of affect how I am and what I do. When I was 16 years old on August 28th, 1963, my mother made me go to the March on Washington. I grew up in DC, and she grew up in the generation of segregation and Jim Crow and all that stuff. And so the March on Washington was happening, and she said, "I want you to go." And that's not one of those periods where your parents would bribe you to go. You know, like with my children, like what am I going to get out of it? Do I get some kind of toy? Do I get an iPad? You know, well, my mother wasn't negotiating. She said, "You're going," right? It was hot, it was dusty, it was big crowds, but three very special things happened there. One, because I grew up in segregation, it's the first time I saw America look like America. It's the first time, because I grew up in all black communities, didn't have a black classmate or teacher until my junior year of college. I never saw what America looked like except on Disneyland and on television and that kind of stuff. At that march, everybody was there. Everybody was there that we talk about in America: black people, white people, Native American people, women, Jewish people. Everybody was there, and it gave me a sense of, so this is what America's like. Then Martin Luther King gave a speech, and the first 7 minutes of the speech was horrible. It was talking about the sweltering heat of racism and the checkmark insufficient funds, and now I'm sitting there getting mad at all these white people that are around me, right? I'm looking at this going, and then halfway through the speech, he says, "But I have a dream today," and he begins to describe something that is still absolutely miraculous and idealistic. And somebody told me recently that got into my central nervous system because it's something I have never forgotten. So my commitment to racial equity work has all been based on sort of what that dream was. But I was just thinking the other day, I'm working on a project about how to live powerfully in American society. And I'm asking myself, what if every American woke up one morning and they were unafraid and they thought they were pretty and they're healthy? What if every American woke up feeling totally content one day? And so what kind of country can we create that does that? So the March on Washington was certainly a defining moment in my existence. So then these 3 jobs in the city of Seattle. The first job that I was asked to take by Mayor of Seattle is to be the innovation director for the city of Seattle. So my responsibility was to manage and focus and facilitate the creative energy of 10,000 employees. Now, this is a job that never existed before, so it's not like you can call somebody and go, how do you do this, right? You're kind of starting this thing from scratch. So I asked the mayor, well, define this job to me. He said, I'll define it to you in 3 ways, and you're not going to like the 3rd way, but the other 2 you're going to be all right with. He says, I want you to be the organizational irritant who goes around asking, how come we're still doing this way, right? He said, in our suggestion award program, which is a program where if employees suggest ideas, they can actually get money if those ideas save the city money. We have 100 ideas. He says, I gotta believe that each employee, all 10,000 employees, have an idea once a year about how to improve their job. So I want you to be the organizational irritant and ask how come we're still doing it this way, but if you're gonna be an irritant, you gotta be a cheerleader. You can't just go around irritating people. You have to do it from the standpoint of your love for what you're doing. All of us can agree on complaint. But if you're trying to do something based on your admiration for the organization, then it's very different. And then he said, and the one you're not going to like is, I want you to be the organizational laxative. Going through my mind, am I a suppository or oral laxative? Because that matters. And I said, so what are you talking about? He said, again, I believe that every employee has an idea about how to improve their work or how to improve our services. And I think those things are blocked up somewhere. They're there, and I think they're blocked up somewhere. So I want you to find that blockage and release all of ideas. To which case I say to him, so do you have a septic system for these ideas? And my job was actually create an idea system and manage creative energy. But what I learned about people and organizations doing that work, that sounds like a terrific job. On your business card, that's the most terrific job you could ever have. But when you look at the amount of conflict that creativity creates in an organization, when the creative molecules start bouncing off of each other, and what you realize is that for most people, to suggest an idea requires an act of courage. Because when they're suggesting an idea that's based on the essence of their entire being, and if you reject their idea, you're not just rejecting something intellectual, you're rejecting the essence of their being, which means if you do that, they will never have another idea again. People say, I had an idea in like 1982 and nobody listened, so I ain't gonna have another idea. All right. So I did that job for 3 years, and then I got a call from the city council. They said, Mickey, we find citizens fairly irritating. And I said, yeah, I understand that, because I've been in 1,000 public meetings. I understand exactly what they're talking about, but I said, isn't it citizens' job to be irritating in a democracy? In a democracy, isn't the right and responsibility of citizens to be irritating? And they're saying, but not irritating like they're irritating. So they said, we'd like you to create a citizens' university where we provide actual classes to help citizens understand how government works. And then at least if they're angry, they will direct their anger to the right mailbox. Right now, what they do is they send it to 9 city council people, the mayor, 26 department heads, and anybody else they think will be able to help. So we get a lot of duplication. So I did that job for like 3 years to sort of improve public engagement in the city of Seattle, and we'll talk about that a little bit. On December 2nd of 2002, this was the doozy one. I get a call, and now I know it's going to be something weird. I'm talking to the deputy mayor, and they said, well, the mayor wants you to consider a job. And I said, okay, what is it this time? I know it's going to be something a little bit different, a little bit weird. So the mayor wants it in all forms of racism and discrimination in city government and in the city of Seattle. Well, okay then. Wait, so he wants to end all forms of racism and discrimination in an organization of 10,000 people and a city of 590,000 people, but is there a job in there somewhere? I mean, what's the actual job? And so what they said is that, the mayor wants you to create the architecture by which we end that, which was the start of something called the Seattle Race and Social Justice Initiative, another thing that had never existed anywhere, and now we're finding those things all over the country. It's really interesting, to think that it started with one person in a conference room on December 2nd of 2002, and has turned into this. So I spent 4.5 years doing race and social justice work, and it was the most toxic job I have ever had in my life. I tried to quit the job every 4 months. I would walk in and say to the mayor, I can't do it. You know how people are about racism and diversity, right? There's just a tremendous emotional load when people are having conversations about that. And part of the job is doing a dance where you don't add additional emotional load to an already existing emotionally loaded situation, but how do you avoid the emotional load? So I would go in to quit, and they would say, you can't quit because we can't find anybody else to do it. And the reason they asked me to do it, by the way, wasn't because I had a profound understanding of race or racism. It's because I had credibility in the organization based on other work I'd done. I had credibility with citizens, and so they said, we've seen you in difficult situations, manage those situations, and we know this is going to be ugly when it starts, so that's why you're going to do it. So I go in and quit, and they say, you can't quit because we can't find anybody else. I knew they were getting better. This is scary. I knew they were getting better when I walked in to quit one day, and the mayor says, well, Mickey, if you quit, racism wins. How you respond to some stuff like that? I mean, it's just patently unfair, but what he learned is the truth, that what racism counts on to perpetuate itself is the people who are fighting it, getting tired of it, and just not wanting to do it anymore. I mean, there are days I just want to go to the Department of Parks and Recreation and run a community center, and do something that's not that emotionally loaded, but racism work has been emotionally taxing. And so eventually they found somebody else to do it, and I went back to the city of Seattle. Then we had 8 African-American young people killed in the first 2 months of 2009. And so I was asked to create the architecture to end youth violence in the city of Seattle, which was another really interesting job. Then I went to the National Park Service. That came absolutely out of nowhere. I had no interest in coming to the East Coast. I believe there was no intelligent life east of I-5. There was never any reason to go east of I-5. I'd go to DC and watch these people run around like they're crazy in New York, and I've had 3 West Coast lobotomies. I've had the California lobotomy, the Oregon lobotomy, and the Washington lobotomy. So I'm like chronically mellow, right? But so when John Jarvis asked me to be deputy director of the National Park Service, I said, no, I don't want to be deputy director. I don't think I'm qualified for that job. This is managing an organization of 26,000 people spread across 10 time zones. I've never managed anybody. Nobody's ever trusted me with money or people. They've trusted me like making up stuff and then institutionalize it, but nobody ever trusted me with money or people. But I did that, and what you understand is when somebody asks you to do something like that, it's a calling. It's not a job offer. It's a calling. So I spent 3.5 years with the first Obama administration working on diversity and equity in the National Park Service, working on community engagement, working on things like local assistance. So anything other than managing the national parks was my responsibility. So I did that for 3.5 years, and then I didn't want to stay for the next administration because I'm getting older and I want to be real careful that I got time to do some stuff I want to do. So I didn't know what I was going to do. So I sent out a couple letters to say, my career has been an absolute gift and I got to find some way to gift it back. One of the people who responded was Mary Watson, who's the Dean of the College of Natural Resources here, who I knew when she was at the University of Vermont, and she said, well, why don't you think about coming to Raleigh? My wife is from South Central Los Angeles. She didn't want no part of the Southeast. no part of the Southeast. But we came down here to visit, and we're riding back, and I said, well, so what do you think about Raleigh? She said, I actually really like it. I think I could live here. And I said, is it that you like Raleigh? Because my other offer was from Texas A&M. She said, is it that you like Raleigh or you don't want to go to Texas? She said, well, that's a good question. Because I had no intention of going to Texas. So I've been here for 4 years. It's been a miraculous experience. We just bought our house here. We live out in East Raleigh in Longview. It's just been, and our relationship has never been better as a result. I don't know what it is, but there's something about Raleigh that's just kind of uncomplicated. And well, at any rate, I'm here and now starting to get involved in a bunch of things in the city. So that's sort of the thing about my career. What we're here to talk about is a thing called inclusive public engagement. And it's something that people are concerned about all over the country right now. The two things that municipalities are really investing a lot of energy in is equity and public engagement, and the crossover between the two, right? Because equitable public engagement is really important in terms of the democratic process. So people all over the country are looking at that, and we have a particularly interesting opportunity here with the creation of Dix Park to create something that epitomizes what democratic, inclusive, enabling public engagement looks like, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. It's the iceberg theory. The problem with most work in government is we're working above the waterline. All right, is we're used to, they say 25% of our problems above the waterline, 75% of our problems are below the waterline, but the stuff below the waterline is real messy stuff. It's messy, it's based on a homeostatic state that's existed for years, and people just don't want to deal with that stuff. So I was called down to Charlotte when they had the police shooting, and they're saying, can you help us heal the community? And I'm saying, well, not if you're going to talk about recalling the mayor or firing the police chief, because that's not going to solve this problem. This problem is below the waterline, and unless you want to get into the messiness of how racism has created victimization in communities of color and how police departments have evolved to control as opposed to, unless you want to talk about all that stuff, then it doesn't make any sense to talk about this. So our conversations, when we start this in the city of Raleigh, are going to have to be below the waterline to acknowledge the messiness of this. All right, the question, how do cities create an inclusionary participatory democracy that makes a powerful contribution and enables citizens to be safe, healthy, unafraid, and prosperous? I don't know what Raleigh's vision is, but the vision that we can't argue about, whether it's here across the country, is that we want all of our citizens to be safe, healthy, unafraid, and prosperous. Can anybody disagree with that? All right, so what is the contribution that public engagement makes toward that end? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. The roles of government. They're commonly accepted roles of government. I'm going to go through these really fast. Protect the lives, property, and rights of citizens. Ensure the health and welfare of the citizenry. You might be thinking about how well Raleigh is doing as it relates to these areas. Ensure the health and welfare of the citizenry, sustainability, protect and ensure the wise use of the environment, provide a safety net for our most vulnerable citizens without creating a culture of entitlement, ensure the economic vitality of the jurisdiction, enrich the lives of citizens through education, arts, and recreation, provide experiences that encourage lifelong creativity, fitness, and learning, create and sustain community spirit, pride, and civility, and provide democratic gathering spaces. Democratic gathering space. So far, could anybody argue with any of those things? But what we know is in municipal government, the way it's structured, that 60%, a bunch of the money goes to personnel costs, and a bunch of other money goes to police and fire. Right? So that in order to do anything except protecting the property lives of citizens, we have to find additional money to be able to do that. But here's what a democratic space is. We provide democratic spaces that provide psychic turf where like people meet to restore the energy it takes to live in a demographically, culturally, and ethnically diverse community. All right, understand? So whenever you have a dominant culture, the cultures under that culture require something called psychic turf. I first heard this when Gloria Steinem was talking about the whole feminist movement, and she talked about women needing a place to go where women could get away from the influences of men to share their experiences and recharge their batteries and all. So that's where the term psychic turf came from. To this day, girls' night out is the most terrifying night of my life. You know, when my wife, because I know that those girls don't have my interest at heart. I know they bashing me and all that stuff, but she needs the psychic turf. Now, it's very narcissistic to think that, I finally realized that they're probably not talking about me at all. They probably got other stuff to talk about. But whenever you have subgroups within a culture, all of them have a need for psychic turf. They have a need to get together, to recharge their batteries, to be irreverent, to talk about the experiences they're having. And then some people say, well, how come white people don't need psychic turf? Well, because you own all of this, right? This is your psychic turf. All right, so then we build a sense of community by finding our commonality and spaces for discovery, health, healing, and celebration. So these places give us an opportunity to come and find out how we're alike. So racial social justice initiative in the city of Seattle, not many people know this, was based on a Stevie Wonder song. And it's a song called Knocks Me Off My Feet. And there's a line in that song that says, I reach out for the part of me that lives in you. I reach out for the part of me that lives in you. If we reach out for the part of us that lives in each other, then we're calmed by our similarities, and then we're able to learn from our differences. But if we're first not calmed by our similarities, then the differences seem predatory sometimes. So at these places, at these democratic spaces, we provide people psychic turf, and then we provide opportunities for them to come together. And then we provide places and experiences where people get to know and care for each other. Where people get to know each other and care for each other. That's what we're talking about in terms of creating a community. All right, what are citizens entitled to for their significant investment in government? Access, quality, value, stewardship, responsiveness, and accountability. That's what citizens are entitled to for their investment in government. And I'm not sure as public servants, we consistently pay attention to this. We see citizens as irritating. We call citizens together when we need something as opposed to when they need something. But these are the things we owe citizens. All right. So what is public engagement? Now, this one up here on the top, on the left, I just came up with this in Philadelphia 2 days ago. Public engagement is the focusing of the citizenry's creative compassion, knowledge, creativity, and energy. This is not about a public meeting. It's not about a public meeting. It's not about bringing people together to solve a problem. Public engagement is the focusing of the citizenry's creative compassion, knowledge, creativity, and energy. Could that work? It might be expensive to change our whole way of thinking about this from public engagement that's sort of centered on public meetings, as opposed to a continual process of focusing the citizenry's creative energy. Okay? Anybody got a problem with that one? Is that a role of government? Okay. All right. Citizen engagement is a two-way flow of information between city government and residents. Two-way. That we get information from them. Wait, who is the we? I got to think of who the we is. Government gets information from citizens, and citizens get information from government that they need to be able to live powerfully in the city. All right. Citizen engagement, a vital component of our commitment to continuous learning, inclusive, enabling participatory democracy. So citizen engagement is a part of the continuous learning process that the city has, because in interactions with citizens, if they're giving us feedback, then we use that feedback to understand how to make course corrections and those kinds of things, all right? The process by which we use the collective intelligence of our customers and constituents to make informed program, policy, and budget decisions. So in the city of Seattle, we found out we were basing $2 billion of decisions based on what about 150 people thought, by virtue of our neighborhood council process. And so we don't know if that's fair, and who are the people making those decisions. All right. Public engagement is a relationship building process, not a information gathering process. It's a relationship building process. We can't just call people together to do something when we need them. We have to consistently keep them involved. We have to build relationships with them. We have to develop partnerships with them. And then the community engagement product is a process activity, and the process is as important as the product. So if we're having a public meeting and we're trying to get some information, and that's why we're doing it, we're having the meeting, but the process of coming together is as important as the product that comes out of that meeting, because the process that we use determines whether citizens will come back or not, whether they will re-engage or not. Okay, let me stop and see if anybody's got any questions about these things. Okay. I want to say that I don't think I'm an expert in this. This is what I know as of 12:30 today. I'm just sharing with you sort of where I am in my understanding of this. All right. Here are the different kinds of community engagement. What government doesn't realize is its most powerful community engagement process is the thousands of transactions that go on between citizens and their government every day. That's the fundamental public engagement activity. And not only do we not recognize that, but we don't utilize that in our public engagement process. Thousands of transactions every day, and those transactions are just transactions. And those transactions have to go well. So a quick story. I'm working in Seattle Parks and Recreation, and my wife signs my daughter up for ballet, and I sign her up for lacrosse at the same time. And so we paid $50 for both of these classes. My wife goes to get one of our $50 back, and Parks and Recreation says, we don't refund money because you and your wife don't talk to each other. Well, they didn't actually say that, but that's how I heard it, right? And I'm thinking, so who needs their $50 more, the city of Seattle or me, right? And I think I need that $50 more than they do. So I don't get my $50 back, and then the bond issue comes up. The bond issue comes up, and I'm thinking about how government treated me, right? In that transaction, I'm looking at that transaction, I get my belief about how effective our government is working in that transaction. When that bond issue comes up, I'm not sure I want to vote for that bond issue. But since it was a Parks and Recreation bond issue, I thought I should vote for it. All right, so does everybody get what I'm saying? The fundamental transaction between citizens and their government every day is the basic form of citizen engagement. All right, we have boards and commissions, we have community and district councils, targeted activity-based activity, surveys and focus groups, public meetings, written communication, open houses, special events. We piggyback on existing events. We use e-government and informal gatherings. Those are all of the ways that we try to get information, or that we can't get information from citizens. Why does the public process often fail? Well, there are a lot of reasons for that. But when I was in Seattle, I would go to these neighborhood councils and I would say, well, why does this stuff not seem to be working? I mean, we're given the appearance of this being a representative democracy, but is it really, right? And they say, well, the problem is there are very few people who come to these neighborhood council meetings, so there are a small group of people who do everything. There are a small group of people who do everything, and those are people who are willing to come out. Then I go to people in the neighborhoods and I say, how come y'all not involved in this stuff? And you know what they said? Because there's a small group of people who do everything. Both groups are complaining about the fact that there's not a lot of participation. The people who are not participating don't feel invited, and the people who are participating feel sort of abused by virtue of all the work they're having to do. So that's just one of the problems I've encountered. All right, I'm going to go through that. All right, this is the definition of normal. You understand this is normal? And the way I look at the world is the way the world is. So I teach a class, and in this class we decided we're going to try to point out why there's no such thing as normal. So we did this thing called potato salad exercise. Because everybody likes potato salad the way they like it, right? Potato salad is one of those things I take with me when I go places. Potato salad and turkey dressing. I don't need nobody else's turkey dressing. I don't need nobody else's potato salad because I make normal potato salad, right? So we say to the class, okay, so we're going to make normal potato salad. I want everybody to write down on a piece of paper everything that's in the potato salad they like most. And of course, a bunch of men didn't have no idea because they're, for whatever reason, their wife makes a potato, so they just kind of guessed at stuff. But we ended up with 73 different ingredients. 73 different ingredients. So then we decided we're going to make normal potato salad. So the rules for making normal potato salad is that everybody has to agree on every ingredient. Get this? Is that right? I mean, it wouldn't be normal if everybody didn't agree on every ingredient. So what do you suppose we ended up with? Nothing. Nothing. Now, one time we did it, we ended up with pepper, paprika, and salt. I don't know how that happened. I have no idea how that happened. But most times we do it, we end up with nothing because people can't agree on the potatoes, right? Are they red potatoes, skins on, skins off? Are they Irish potatoes? Are they Yukon Gold? Can't nobody agree on the potatoes. But the way the exercise starts and the way the facilitator can screw it up is by talking about what kind of binding agent that you have in a potato salad. So you got several options. You got Miracle Whip, you got Hellman's, and you got Kraft. See, that's what's screwed up about North Carolina. I didn't know nothing about Dukes until I did this exercise. So what I do right away is I put Miracle Whip up there, and a whole bunch of people don't like Miracle Whip, right? So the Miracle Whip goes right away. Now the Miracle Whip people are pissed off. So they're going to eliminate the best foods, and just because they're pissed off because theirs got eliminated, they don't care whether it got no binding agent in or not. You dish mine, I'm going to dish yours. See how it starts to get into this predatory thing? It ain't even about potato salad anymore, right? And then we get down to it, and this Dukes thing comes up. And there's some people in North Carolina will not eat potato salad without Dukes in it, right? They just dish everything. So I had to go out and get some Dukes because I ain't never had no Dukes before. And so I got some Dukes and I tasted. I kind of see, what it is. And I did some research on it. And what Dukes does is they got more eggs in their potato salad than exists in other potato salad. And Dukes is pretty good on some stuff, but they couldn't agree on the kind of pickle, whether it's sweet pickle or dill pickle, whether it's any pickle at all. They couldn't agree on the onion. Somebody had maraschino cherries on their thing. All right. So to shorten this up, you understand there's no such thing as normal. There is no such thing as normal. So this is what we hope America looks like, because this is a simple America to live in. This one right here, that there's normal and then things sort of gravitate out from normal. Normal is best food mayonnaise, and abnormal is Miracle Whip. Miracle Whip is all the way on the edge. The Dukes is somewhere in the middle, right? But it's pathological. When we're normal, we look at anything outside of what we do as pathological. So here's what America really looks like. This is what America looks like. And it's a hard country to live in. It's a hard country to live in, and it gets harder and harder because there is no such thing as normal. And anytime we begin to operate out of our personal value system, it is likely to clash with somebody else's value system if we don't understand that value system. So this is what America looks like this. When America looks like this, these three things happen. When people feel they have no control over their wider world, they begin tending to their personal lives, their communities, and their immediate relationships. When things get too complicated, people do what's called reductionism. When people see their world and society crumbling, they think, I can't do anything about these larger problems, so I just deal with what I can control in my own little world, right? When you got this complicated normal. And communities factionalize when they believe their needs cannot be met through their interactions with the systems that serve the larger community, when they believe that they are best served serving themselves, right? So we have communities factionalizing. And Raleigh is subject to that just like everybody else is. City of Seattle was a pretty, I only lived there 20 years, but when I moved there, it was kind of a black and white city. It's still the fifth whitest city in America, but now we have 85 different ethnic groups that speak 135 different languages, okay? So how do we how do we manage that city as a city? Let's see what else we got here. So that's what we want to think about as normal, but that's what's normal. So how do we make the shift between creating government programs and services that are sort of based on that old definition of normal, and we're starting to look at the new definition of normal. So I want you to know that underlying this, I believe that Dix Park is the solution to all of this. Because of the potential of what can go on there. It can be the ultimate democratic space where we provide activities, programs, and services that serve individuals, that serve groups of people, that talk about democratic process, that talk about responsibilities of citizenship. It just lends itself to that kind of stuff. It's a beautiful place, and I've been working lately on the relationship of beauty to your psycho-emotional state. You know, when you're around beautiful places, you don't ever think about hurting people, right? It's in the absence of beauty that we lose sight of some of the compassion that we need to have. All right, so this is the chart that started the Race and Social Justice Initiative in the city of Seattle. So the mayor says, we want you to create the architecture of this, and by the way, one of the mistakes I made is going back to Providence to visit my daughter at the Rhode Island School of Design, and I was with her, and we were having dinner, and she said, Dad, I have to leave, and I go, why? She says, because I have to do a 3-hour drawing, and I said, I understand, how could they make you draw for 3 hours? And she said, they don't make us draw for 3 hours, but they make us look at what we're gonna draw for an hour before we can start drawing it. Now, I don't know if you understand how profound that is, but luckily you're kind of a nice looking guy, but if I looked at you for an hour, I would see things that I would not see if I just started drawing you, right? So the first thing we decided in the city of Seattle is we need to take a year to look at this. We need to take, because what we do is we see symptoms and we respond to symptoms and try to eliminate symptoms, but it's nothing systemic. It's all above the waterline stuff. It doesn't get to the other stuff. So we decided we were going to look at it for a year. So here's what we found out, but I'm just only going to talk about this in terms of public engagement. In my work in public engagement, we found out that the only people who go to public meetings, and now this is verified by research throughout the country, are white adult homeowners. White adult homeowners, because they have their most prized possession, their most expensive possession, and those people who are going to want to make sure the government's not going to make a decision that's going to affect the price of their property, and they won't be able to send their children to college and all that kind of stuff. So white adult homeowners pretty much dominate public process, right? But the way government works is that, and so this is called an inclusionary participatory democracy. I was working for the governor of California in 1977, Jerry Brown, when he was governor the first time, when something called Proposition 13 passed, which was called the Jarvis-Gantt Initiative, which was the first citizens' revolt against government. And by the way, we think that happened because the Iron Curtain had fallen, and we used to all hate Russia, and now we decided we all hate government. But we had to hate something, right? All right, so what happens is that we wanted to create an inclusionary participatory democracy because citizens had abdicated their responsibility to us to make decisions for us, and then citizens said, for the investment I'm making in government, seems like I should be happier. And I'm not happier, so I'm gonna start restricting the amount of money I spend in government. So we decided we need to create an inclusionary participatory democracy because an inclusionary participatory democracy is an enabling democracy. When you have citizens involved in design, delivery, evaluation, evolution of their programs and services, then they are more likely to be enabling in terms of government services than to be regulatory. When they're kept out of government as a spectator, then they're likely to be regulatory. So, and we didn't keep them out necessarily, but citizens abdicated their responsibility up until about 1977 and said, government, make all the decisions you want. And then they got pissed off at us for the decisions we were making, and then they wanted to take some of that back. So, all right, so citizens send knowledge, information, energy, and resources to government. Now you see there's a barrier there and some people behind that barrier. Those people also send money to government. Those are taxpayers, right? Those are taxpayers, and we'll get to them in a minute. All right, so we got these citizens who send information to government, and government turns that money into programs and services that come out the other side. That's a function of government, to make good policy decisions and to create great programs and services that come out the other side. Well, if the people who are giving advice are green, and the people who are making decisions are green, what are the programs and services going to look like? All right. Does everybody get this? You got green people advising government, and you got green people making decisions, then the programs and services that come out the other side are going to be programs and services that appeal to green people, right? Nothing racist about that. This is the way systems work. It's single loop thinking. And by the way, if other people wanted to come to these public meetings, they could come, right? So if they don't come, that's their problem. How many people believe that? How many people believe that you have a right to come to a public meeting, and if you don't come, then you got to live with the consequences? How many people believe that? Okay, all right. And I think some of that's true. Another corresponding thing to Parks and Recreation is people say when people have free time, they can make whatever decisions they want to make, and if they choose not to go camping and hiking and interacting with nature and that kind of stuff, that's their business. How many people believe that? Yeah, I believe that about tennis and golf. I do not believe that about interaction with nature. I believe interaction with nature is fundamental to us all in terms of us understanding ourselves, our systems, our communities, how things work. I've made a list of ways I'm not going to die. There are just lots of ways I'm not going to die. When I went to Yosemite as Deputy Director of the National Park Service, and I looked at El Capitan and Half Dome, nothing suggested to me I should climb that. It's pretty, right? But there's some people who want to climb it. They can climb it if they want to. I'm not climbing it. But not climbing it and not interacting with the beauty of Yosemite are two different things. So I believe that nature is absolutely essential. And again, Dix represents a very special part of nature. I had a dog that I walked there every day until she died. It was both of our favorite places because it just fed our souls. That's just me as an individual. All right. So there's a barrier there, right? There's a barrier there which suggests that some people aren't being engaged in government, right? And so we have to figure out what's in that barrier. Well, what green people do is they decide that the people outside the barrier really want to be green people, so they keep giving them green people stuff. They give them opportunities to assimilate into a system that is already not working for them. You get this? So we will give you opportunities to come in and be like us, right? And most of the process is about giving people opportunities to assimilate and to be strong in the system that we have. But systems are created to serve the people who create the systems. Systems are created to serve the people who created the systems. So you have all of these people outside there who are looking in, and they're trying to figure out what's in the barrier too. And the reality is neither of those groups know what's in the barrier. But in 1970, when I graduated from college, William Penn Mott, the director of California State Parks, asked me to do a survey about why black people don't go to state and national parks and go camping and hiking, right? And I did the survey, and I gave it to the green people, and the green people took the information in the survey, and what they came up with is black people don't go camping and hiking because they don't have money, equipment, or supplies, or transportation. Because anybody in their right mind would put 35 pounds on their back and walk 5 miles and sleep on the ground and eat dehydrated food. That's fun. Well, that ain't fun. That's not fun. So, but what I'm saying is that the assumptions that the green culture makes about what's happening outside that barrier are really keeping us from solving the problem. So what's in the barrier? So my son works for the Nike company. And he runs what's called the Air Force brand at Nike. I'm going to just pick on somebody. What kind of shoes you got on? Okay, yeah. I'm going to pick on you. All right. So what do you suppose the percentage of black people are who exclusively buy Nike? What do you suppose the percentage of black people are who exclusively buy Nike?
Exclusively buy Nike?
Exclusively.
Like zero?
Huh?
Zero?
No. I'm at least one.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah. You don't look at this stuff a lot. What kind of athletic shoes you got?
Nike Freeze.
Hmm?
Nike Freeze.
Nike threes? Yeah, okay, all right. So I'll tell you what the percentage is. 90. 90% of African Americans who buy athletic equipment buy Nike, right? Now, I was at the Nike campus just last week, and I'm looking at people, and the Nike campus does not reflect the diversity of America. They got a lot of European people, a lot of Asian people, a lot of Indian people, a lot of diversity. It looks like the United Nations, but not a lot of domestic, what they call minority populations. So how did Nike figure out how to get 90% of African American people to buy their shoes? Well, they had to look behind that barrier, didn't they? They had to look behind that barrier and find out what's different about black people. All right, so what's different about black people is black people like style, right? Style is a big part of it. You gotta look good. That's why I won't ride a bicycle. You can't look good riding a bicycle. I'm sorry, Dawn. I'm sorry. You can't look good riding a bicycle. So Nike bought color and fashion. You're not gonna hurt me now, are you?
We'll talk later.
Okay, all right. Actually, I have a whole nother thing about bicycles. So. All right, but yeah, Nike realized that African Americans like color and style and fashion and that kind of stuff. They like heroes, so they went out and started getting heroes like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and they're brand loyalists. When my mother bought Clorox, she bought Clorox her whole life. She had never bought another kind of bleach her whole life, and they're brand loyalists. And so they have these people in the system. And so imagine what kind of income that is. Imagine what kind of income that is. So, but let's switch this to national parks. So the reason, what else green people have done, is they've done what's called the homogenization of diversity. They call all these people behind this barrier minority people, right? It's a generic group of people that we've all kind of put together in some amorphous group, not thinking that these are individual, independent cultures with rich histories and interests and all of those things, but we don't look at that. We look at them as minority people and therefore prescribe solutions for that whole group of people called minority people. But the reason African Americans don't go to national park is just because of biophobia or indifference. The reason Native Americans don't go is because they're pissed off, because that's where they used to live. Hispanics go, but they're creating weird problems. Because Hispanics, you know, every campground in every state or national park in America is set up for 4 people, right? Hispanics don't travel like that. I was just talking to a guy in Philadelphia who said, we got 4 people in the front seat, right? But you understand that we really need to start creating an opportunity to understand the ethnic and the cultural differences between these people. Now, here's a problem. Race has obfuscated our ability to see ethnicity and culture. There's no such thing as race. There's no biological evidence of race. It's something we have created. But when you begin to look at people through the lens of race, you begin to deny the things that make them unique and special and their cultures and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things we got to do is we got to stop using the word race. Now, I'm not saying that race has not had an unbelievable impact on American society, but it obfuscates our ability to see the solution. We got 10 minutes, huh? All right, I'm gonna fast forward. In some communities, we have these communities called communities of despair. East Raleigh is a community of despair, right? It stays the same. In communities of despair, these are the things we have: high unemployment, underemployment, low incomes, family. You have all of those things, and those things have existed for generations. Time magazine did a cover when Freddie Gray got killed in Baltimore, and this is Baltimore, and they took their 1968 cover, scratched out 1968 and put 2015 because nothing has changed. Because nothing has changed. So what is it we need to do to break cycles of racism and poverty in those communities that will allow these things to change? Because what we're fond of doing is showing people a way out of these communities, not improving these communities. East Raleigh has probably looked the same way for I've just been here for 4, but it's probably looked the same way for a long time. So we want to show people a way out, but we also need those people who believe the minimum wage is the best in their life they're ever going to be able to do. All right. So in our society, our American society was founded on two opposable principles. One, the rugged individualist, the other, the barn raising. And there's a huge conflict with about those things in our government system. There are some people who believe that we should take care of ourselves. We're all rugged individualists. It's our responsibility to do that. And there's some people who believe we need to take care of each other. Some people who believe we need to take care of each other. And neither of those things happen in the absolute. There's no such thing as a rugged individualist. There's no such thing as anybody who made it on their own in American society. There's no such thing as that. All right? And everybody can't be a barn raiser. But the question is, how do we in Raleigh find the sweet spot between barn raisers and rugged individualists? So here's what we want to create for a community. Our community, safe, healthy, unafraid, rise above their self-interest for common good, are mindful of the collective impact of their individual acts, are consistently mindful about how their interactions, good or bad, impact others. They extend their love, respect, trust, credibility to people outside their reference groups. They tell a common story about their community. Their behaviors align with common values. They can realize their potential. They responsibly pursue their view of happiness. Are we doing that in the Raleigh community? And I imagine you would say in some places in the Raleigh community we're doing that, but we're not doing that universally. So there's more stuff in here, but I'm going to stop because I promised to give like some time for questions. But what I'm trying to get to is I'm trying to get to Dix Park being the experiment that gets people in Raleigh to understand how public engagement and a democracy really works. There are people who live on the border of Dix Park who know that it's going to be gentrified and they're going to lose their houses. That does not necessarily have to be the case. The mayor of Seattle just passed something that said the growth of Seattle will not be at the expense of our most vulnerable citizens. As a matter of fact, the growth of Amazon and Starbucks and all that, we will use that growth to help our most vulnerable citizens. And are we thinking like that in this city? So I'm going to stop. Yes, sir.
What have you found in other communities in terms of what's the low-hanging fruit? Some of the easier things to start with.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the low-hanging fruit is doing something. The low-hanging fruit is not having meetings and talking about this. Because I've been a part, when I left the National Park Service, I said I will never work with another organization that tries to solve problems up here, right? Because I can't tell you how many times secretaries got together and they signed these agreements that said they were going to do something and they put some money to it and the problem is here and the money goes about right there and nothing ever happens. So I think the first thing we do is we start creating little experiments about how this works. We actually do things. We find a piece of money and we begin to, so the thing I didn't say, which is the scariest part of this really, is about what's our farm team for democracy in Raleigh? What are we providing for children that's inspiring them to be good citizens, right? What are we doing for them and what are we going to expect when these people get older? How are they going to act as citizens? But I believe that the most important thing is not to talk about stuff, because we can talk about stuff in our head until we're blue in the face, that we begin to do what's called minimally viable products, which is what tech people do. They put out a phone, they know the phone ain't working, but they know the market will correct it. They know the market will correct it. So rather than try to come up with perfect programs or try to solve things across an entire organization, begin to create a series of small experiments that not only represents our new value system, but also gives us information about whether it's going to work or not. So that's what I think. But it's not about people meeting and talking about stuff.
So do you mean, are we talking about Dix Park mainly in this talk, or just in general?
No, we're going to limit this.
Dix.
Yes.
So you're saying like
Yeah.
maybe some kind of experiment in the park, like let's try some event, or just do something
Yeah.
and see what happens.
That we do activity-based public engagement. That we don't, I hate public meetings. I just hate public meetings. I think they're the greatest waste of time I've ever seen. There are always those professional citizens who get in there and dominate everything, and people don't come and people get frustrated. But to actually have activity-based public engagement where you're taking constituencies or cultural tribes or neighborhoods, but actually bringing them to the space and having activity in the space and then talking to them about the space, but not talking about them about the space in some abstract way. Like, here's a picture of Dix Park. What do you want over here? What do you want over there? I believe public engagement is absolutely necessary. I mean, public meetings are necessary, but it is not going to give us the information we need to have. So I think we identify constituencies and groups that have cross purposes with ours. I think we begin to get schools involved. What an exciting project would it be? I live close to Enloe High School, to take a civics class at Enloe High School and give them Dix. And say, do Dix. How much would they learn about government? How much more would they learn about government by being the people who do that in the community, as opposed to, I don't even think they do how a bill becomes a law anymore. I think civics in school is horrible, but that's our farm team, right? So how would we think about doing those kinds of things?
I had a question. I know it takes a long time to affect change. With your experience in Seattle, and maybe being more progressive than a lot of other places in the United States, I'm just wondering what sort of lessons learned or a success story from Seattle. I know you just also mentioned that Seattle doesn't want the success of Amazon and Starbucks, so that's a current story to be even more oppressive upon the existing community. But I'm wondering, like, over those couple of decades, or 3 decades, if you have some success stories about how communities or folks that lived there before have been preserved.
Well, about the equity stuff, I have a list of 27 reasons why this stuff don't work that I've accumulated since 1970, right? And I didn't accumulate them to make people frustrated. I accumulated them because you begin to hear these things in conversations over and over again. Like, people believe they can do equity work by not disturbing anything else in their organization, right? We can do this without building our capacity to do this. There's all kind of stuff like that. But a great example in the city of Seattle, I had to facilitate some fairly tacky stuff. And we have this community garden. We had this community garden, and the mayor got a call that the people in the community garden were about to beat up on each other. And I can only tell you this the way it happened, because the white people in the garden were pissed off at the Asian people in the garden. And the reason they're pissed off at the Asian people in the garden is because the Asian people won't weed their garden, right? They seem not to be paying attention to the garden, so the garden just looks terrible, right? Now, the white people garden looks really good because they're using herbicide and pesticide and stuff, right? And it's in perfect rows and all that stuff. And the Asian people saying, we've been doing this for generations. We let this stuff die and it goes into the soil and creates better soil. But these two groups of people, the white people were trying to throw the Asian people out of the garden, right? Because their garden didn't look good, right? So we come together, we have some facilitation, we talk about this. We really knew we were successful when we started seeing bok choy show up in the black people garden and collard greens show up in the Asian garden. Because what diversity is about is sharing aspects of our culture that enrich our culture. I mean, look at all the restaurants in Raleigh now that are borrowing cultural influences from other places. So all of a sudden, these people who are at odds with each other because of the history of it are using this community garden thing to share their culture and values and things like that. But you understand, it's doing something, right? It's actually going out and getting something done and experimenting with something and learning from the failures and experimenting with the successes. And you're not going to like this one. Maybe some of you aren't going to like this one. But the reason that marijuana is legal in the state of Washington is because of the Race and Social Justice Initiative in the city of Seattle. We looked at the number of young African-American kids who are being put in jail for having a small quantity of marijuana, disproportionate to anything else in the environment, right? And going to jail and coming out and not be able to vote, not be able to get loans, not be able to buy property. So when they come out of jail, what do? They sell marijuana again, right? And so we just decided that the cost of arrest, incarceration, temporary incarceration, criminal justice system, we looked at all those numbers and said, this just isn't working. This is taking a lot of money, and we're not seeing those people, they're not felons who go around hurting people. But one of the real ironies in the situation is now on the corner, 23rd and Union, they got a marijuana store that's making $1 million a week. $1 million a week. On that very same corner, young African-American people got busted for 20 years for selling small amounts of marijuana and went to jail on that very same corner, right? So I'm simply saying, for every act of creativity, there's an act of destruction. And people will always pay attention to the destruction rather than paying attention to the possibility. People will fight with every bit of energy they got for their dysfunctionality. They will fight to be dysfunctional, to stay dysfunctional, because it's what they know. So for every act, as Picasso said that, for every act of creativity, there's an act of destruction. You know what you have, but you don't know what the new thing is going to give you, so you decide that you're comfortable with your dysfunction. Okay? I'm very happy to be here in Raleigh and to get to be a part of this. I think this is going to be an experiment in democracy, this whole thing.